Vien Truong is the director of the NGO Green for All. Vien, you can sit over here. Jean Lambert is an MEP with the UK Green Party in the European Parliament. And Vic van Vuren is the director of the Enterprise Department with the International Labour Organization. So each of our speakers is going to deliver their presentation, which will last no more than 10 minutes. So if I can ask you, Vien, first to deliver your presentation, and I think it should be ready to go. I'll take my own pair of sunglasses because I'll keep them as well. There you go.
That was fun. Do you guys have fun building the blocks? Yes? I'm from California. We like to have interaction and direct back and forth. I am very Californian. Let me share that I'm with an organization called Green for All. And Green for All is known to be one of the leaders in helping to create a green economy that is strong enough to lift people out of poverty. And in fact, our founder, Van Jones, famously wrote a New York Times bestseller coining the terms green collar economy, and went on to the White House under President Obama to help lead the green jobs efforts. And our organization was the one that helped to catalyze the first ever Green Jobs Act in 2007 that directed the first federal investments to supporting green jobs and green jobs training. And so I am so proud to be here and to be an ally from the United States to talk about and support what is going on here in the efforts to create and advance a green collar economy. But first, I think it's important to share a little bit too of why I'm here and who I am. You see, my family, we first came to the United States when I was just a baby. And in fact, my mom, who's 44 years old, when she was pregnant with me, getting into a boat with 9 other kids and an 80-year-old grandma. And they had to row 500 miles from Vietnam to Macau to get out of the war, across oceans that have claimed the lives of their friends and family just recently. They eventually do make it to the United States, where my parents found jobs as migrant farm workers. Oftentimes, my mom would have me strapped to her back as she was picking strawberries and snow peas. We eventually moved to Oakland, California, where I continue to live. And my parents, who never learned to speak English, the only jobs that they could find was to work in garment factories, what is traditionally known as sweatshops, oftentimes getting paid just around 25 cents for a shirt. So you'll have to do that for euros. What I have learned is that my parents' biggest dream for me has always been to get a college education and to get as far as possible from the conditions of Oakland. But I didn't quite understand that these conditions in Oakland, California were abnormal. And so let me paint a picture for you of what it does look like here in my hometown. You see, in Oakland, California, we're a community that is surrounded on all sides by highways. And there are busy trucks, buses, and cars that goes by our communities all day, every day. And these are essentially like little refineries on wheels. And the soot and particulate matter that comes out of their tailpipes, it gets into the lungs of our kids, causing 1 out of 4 kids in my community to have asthma. It's one of the highest in the country. And the same particulate matter, it gets into the bloodstreams of our elders, causing record high levels of heart disease and strokes. And so we have a dry cleaners down the street from my house. And it turns out that they've been storing these huge tanks of chemicals underground. And it turns out that these tanks have been leaking for years. And we don't know yet still how much of it has gone into our wells, how much it has gone into the nearby stream, and how much it is saturated in the very soil in which our community grows our fruits and vegetables. Now, on top of that, we are heavily dependent on public transportation. Our buses, though, are unreliable and very slow. If you happen to miss one, you have to wait for the next, which may take up to an hour. And if it's raining, it's especially hard. Worse, many people who depend on it have lost their jobs because they couldn't get to work on time. The only alternative, though, is to get on a BART, which is our subway. But the subway costs 3 times more to get to work on. And it is 30 minutes walk, which is really hard if you have young kids or grocery bags or if you're elderly. And so for us, it is literally like we are being trapped in a suffocating community. And so we're here to talk about how to create a green collar economy. Because what I want you to know is that even though many people have said that jobs and the green economy is going to be exclusive of reducing environmental burdens, what we now know and what Oakland paints a picture of is that these issues of poverty and pollution are so deeply interconnected. And we have to understand them both if we're going to do something about it. Now, let me share some good news. In the last few years, many of our states have stepped forward, and I have helped to create and pass over 20 state policies across the United States in the last 10 years. Let me share with you some bright spots. California has a carbon pricing program, which we call Cap and Trade. In the last few years, I was lucky to be part of a team that helped to develop a law requiring that 35% of the total revenues from this carbon pricing program gets invested in the poorest and most polluted communities. And we know what these communities are because we can track on a mapping system where's the highest levels of groundwater contamination, where are the highest levels of particulate matter, where are the highest levels of infant mortality, dropout rates, and a number of other social and economic and environmental burdens that these communities face. And these communities are the ones eligible for the set-aside fund, which thus far has been over $900 million. And here's what they've been investing in. They've been investing in improving public transportation, free bus passes for seniors and students. And this is increasing ticket sales for buses, which is increasing operations of buses in key disadvantaged communities, like mine. It's investing in helping families cash their cars, cash their clunkers, that then gives them a Clipper card, and they can use the subway or the bus without worrying about the price. It's been helping to accelerate our move to clean transportation, getting us to invest in fuel cell buses, in dry-age trucks, in making sure that we're actually creating pilot programs like carpools and van shares for migrant farm workers who otherwise wouldn't even have public transportation. We've been using it to invest in thousands of free solar programs for low-income families who otherwise could not afford solar. And what we're hearing back is families that used to see their energy bill at $200 on average has dropped their energy bill to $1.50 because they're now on solar. And think about how they can use that money now to reinvest back into their local economy. Finally, we're beginning to see that money invested in affordable housing, in thousands of free trees, in high-speed rail, in transit hubs, in energy efficiency, and much more. And guess what? That is what is creating California's green economy. And that is one of the reasons why California is now the 6th largest economy in the world. So you see, doing good can also help do good for the economy. Now, we heard a little bit about the financing work that's happening here now. Let me add that in California, we took $140 million of this carbon pricing program money, and we invested in a separate fund to match it with private capital. And that is creating nearly a new $1 billion. So now we're seeing $2 billion invested in the poorest and most polluted communities. Let me wrap up by saying this. This is what changing the future of our economy looks like. This is what we have to do in order to create the future economy. Now, I know there's a lot of worry about what President Trump is doing around the environment, and that he is sending mixed signals to the world. Let me be clear that even though he is, there are so many people who knows and is pushing forward to advance the green economy in the United States. And believe me, even if Trump is trying to promise to resurrect coal, even the coal companies know that that is a false promise and that coal and fossil fuels are really a thing that's moving in the past. In fact, A Kentucky coal company announced last month that they are building a solar farm on coal land, on coal country land, and on former strip land. And ironically, even Kentucky's Museum for Coal is putting solar panels on their rooftops. So we know we've got to move forward, and we are moving forward. What's happening in Washington is not a reflection of what's happening across the country at large. States like California, New York, Illinois, Oregon, and many more are continuing to step forward, as are our private industry partners, as are our NGOs. And this is important, because people from communities like mine cannot afford any further delays. We rely on your help and your leadership to keep moving us forward. And I ask that you remember that this fight for climate justice, it's not just the biggest ecological fight of our lifetimes. It's also about creating this new economy, a new energy system, a new relationship to the planet and to each other. It is a fight for our land and water and food sustainability. It is about indigenous and human rights and about dignity for all of us. This is about shifting our economy to a world that we want. We cannot sit this out, not because we have too much to lose, but because we have so much to gain. I celebrate and encourage all of your efforts and applaud your good work in helping to advance green jobs, and ask that we ensure that there are pathways into those jobs by entry-level people from communities that are impoverished. I ask that you ensure that there are direct investments into the poorest and most polluted communities. I ask that you make sure that there is always a seat at your table for people who come from communities like mine, the Oaklands of your country. My voice is but one example of what people from my community can do and can provide perspective on. It is the very people who are closest to the problem who knows what solutions will and will not work. I've come to Brussels because what happens here will affect Oakland. What happens in Oakland will affect Brussels. And despite what President Trump thinks, each of our survival is tied to survival of others, and it's our hope for a sustainable environment, energy system, and economy. However, that is dependent on our value of compassion, community, and connectivity. This work to create an equal society is not about charity for others. It's about what has been confirmed by many economists, from the World Bank to the Federal Reserve, that having a more equal economy is good for the overall economy, the health and well-being for everyone, and for the vibrancy and the strength of our democracy. I am here because we have to coal and create that future. This is the future that we want to create, the future we want our kids to inherit, and the future is worth us fighting for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vien. And I have to say, your speech is really inspiring, and good to know the Green movement is forging ahead despite the reservations people may have about, well, you will continue. No, that's really, really excellent. Very, very good news, and thank you for that. And I presume people can go on your website, can they? Green for All? Yeah, greenforall.org. Greenforall.org is Vien's website if you want to find out more about the work that they're doing.